You're listening to The Arms Room on the Vets on Media Network.
All right, you're on The Arms Room with Glenn.
And John.
And Brian.
All right. So, how we doing, Jonathan?
I am well.
You know why I like to call you Jonathan?
Because you know I hate it?
Because your name isn't Jonathan.
No, it's not.
Does everyone know what your real name is?
I think we've shared this before.
Well, I'm going to do it again because it's that
You
freaking
go
awesome.
right ahead.
Is it Francis?
It's not. John's name is, no joke, John Wayne. At first, I was hesitant to bring John onto the team, but then he was like, my name's John Wayne. Sold, you're in.
You're in. You know the funny thing about that? Where John hails from, it's probably not that uncommon.
It's probably true.
It actually is very uncommon.
Really?
My name, I've never, there are others of us like John Wayne Gacy. It's the other famous John Wayne, but it's really not that common. I've never met anyone else that was named John Wayne other than,
Can you give us a quote or
my
something?
dad. Shut up, Mason.
That's not a John Wayne quote.
But it is now. John Wayne just said it.
It's a pretty steady arms room quote, though.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
It's a pretty good. That our next shirt is just going to
Yeah,
say
I was about
"Shut
to
up,
say
Mason"
that.
on the
Yeah,
back.
shirt.
That's
The arms
awesome.
room on the front. "Shut up, Mason" on the back.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
So on today's show, we're gonna have Charles Heller from the Arizona Citizens Defense League, but also notably from several pretty famous court cases.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be talking to us primarily. We're going to start off talking about the universal background checks. Some pretty serious nonsense has just been passed in a couple of states with this whole universal background check thing, including in Washington, where it may now possibly work out to be a felony if you are hunting, let's say, and you hand your rifle to your buddy to cross over a fence like every smart, intelligent person would do. And he does not, you basically didn't officially and legally transfer that firearm to him. And so it's actually technically a felony to do that kind of stuff. If you're at the range and you let your friend, use your firearm without transferring it over to him, it could now potentially be against the law.
So literally, I'm curious about that pistol. Let me run it for a few rounds.
Yeah.
I'm going to prison.
And before anybody,
Yep.
directly quotes us on that, this again, a lot of that stuff I know is kind of hearsay stuff I've read on the interwebs and such. So that's why we have Charles Heller on the phone here in just a few minutes, because we're going to get his direct, very intelligent, highly informed information directly from the source about those kinds of legislations that are being passed, universal background checks, and why, we talked on the show, I don't know, it's probably been 6 or 7 months ago, about why we're losing the fight for gun rights. And it's not because there aren't people in America who care about gun rights. It's because we all can't get on the same freaking page.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You have people who are like, well, I'm okay with guns, but I'm not okay with ARs. Or I'm okay with ARs, but I'm not okay with
I'm okay
high-capacity
with
magazines.
things that have
or-
sporting purposes.
Exactly. Yet I use my AR as a sporting rifle more than I use almost anything else. I was just out Friday hunting coyotes with my AR. And so, it's we all have to get on the same page. We have to quit saying, oh, I'm okay with this, but I'm not okay with that, or I'm okay with this, but I'm not okay
You
with
either
that.
are or you aren't.
You're either on this team or you're not.
Yep.
And so as soon as Charles calls back in, Mason, you gonna let us know, give us a thumbs up or something. All right, cool. So he'll be calling in here in a minute or two. Any notable news going on before we get Mr. Heller on the phone?
Police officers in New York.
Yeah,
Oh,
two
yeah.
cops in New York executed.
Yeah, that's right. And I quote, the thug said, "I'm putting pigs in a blanket," and then executed both those guys while they sat in their patrol car. And quite honestly, I blame it on all the race baiters.
Yeah.
Well, the
This
beauty,
blood is on their hands.
the truly messed up part about that situation is one of the officers was Asian descent and the other one was Hispanic.
Yeah.
And their race baiters are fueling this fire. And when they went out there and executed cops, they just shot the first two they came across and wasn't even achieving the point they were trying to make.
All right. Mr. Heller's calling in. Go ahead and put him on, Mason. Charles, you with us?
Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I am. Huey-O, heads up and eyes open, ready to go.
Good, good. Hey, thanks for calling in. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, hey, Mason, turn up his volume a little bit. So we were just kind of sitting here talking about kind of what we want to talk to you about today, which is the universal background check issue, and also the issue that happened up in Washington, the whole transferring of firearms back and forth. Kind of give us some more information about that.
Well, the law is 18 pages long. It's written in extremely confusing. It's written in a style similar to that the Obamacare was written.
Mm-hmm.
It's confusing. It's rather complex. It's difficult to figure out exactly who is covered and but more importantly, who is exempt from it. Also, gifts. A true gift between a family member is exempt, but a loan is not. And so, it's very difficult to know when you would be covered, when you wouldn't. And it's written in a way that's sort of a prosecutor's dream, because it's difficult to comply with. And so, if it's difficult to comply with, gives the prosecutor all the discretion he wants, whether he wants to prosecute a case or not. And that's not equality. That's not the rule of law. That's the rule of flip a coin.
Now, isn't that really, I mean, when you look at legislation like this, you have a lot of experience with this kind of legislation and reading it and understanding it. Isn't that kind of what this type of legislation is designed to do? Just be incredibly confusing.
Yeah. The idea being, the more complex you make it to trade in arms, the more most people who may not be as enthused about guns as you and I might be are going to say, "Oh, bleep it! I'll just get something else."
Now, before we get too much more into the universal background check and some of the other things that are going on, if you would kind of give us a little bit of your background. All of us sitting at the table here, we know who you are and where you come from and what you've done for our great state in Arizona and your involvement with our Arizona Citizens Defense League. But for those who are listening who may not know who you are, may not recognize your last name, Heller, which if they don't, they suck at Google. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, first of all, I keep getting this question all the time. So I'm not the Heller of Heller versus District of Columbia.
Right.
I know Dick Heller. I've interviewed him on the radio, but I'm no Dick Heller. So that's number one. Second of all, I started out in Chicago. I had an air gun range in my grandfather's basement, which wasn't legal, but oh well. And I had a lot of fun. And practiced for years. I come to realize I had kind of a long range. It was a 60-foot range, and I was just using the Winchester 1894 Daisy BB rifle. But I got proficient with it. And anyway, when I turned 21, like an idiot, I would have registered a gun by the Chicago law, and I wanted to own a handgun. I wanted a .22 handgun, and you couldn't, because the scam in Chicago was you could own any handgun you want there as long as it's registered. Okay, here's my registration. Sorry, we don't accept those. That was what the whole McDonald versus City of Chicago lawsuit was about in 2010.
So even beyond the FOID card or the FOID card in Illinois, they could still choose to not accept that.
Well, in Chicago, that was because Chicago has home rule. They could make up any law they want. That's why state preemption, like we have in Arizona, is so important. And in Chicago, they said, sure, you can own a handgun as long as you register it, and then they wouldn't accept the registration. And if you had one and you were registering it, you had to re-register it every year. Those registrations just expire. You know how that is. The gun is not is something different next year.
Right.
And so they required you to re-register every year. And of course, a lot of people forgot over the years, or skipped a year, or thought they'd sent it in and didn't, or maybe didn't have the money. And although I don't think it was a lot of money to register a gun, but if you had a bunch of guns, it was $5 or $10 a gun to register it. So if you had 300 guns, that was a lot of money every year. And I realize not everybody has 300 guns, but the point was it was designed to tax it out of existence. And for the most part, it did as far as legal guns. It didn't do anything to illegal guns except create more of them. Anyway, I voted with my feet against that scam, and I came to Arizona, where a free man puts a gun on his side and is done with it. And that's what I did. And so over the years, I became more and more active. I became an instructor. I got certified to teach the Arizona Concealed Weapons class, which I've been doing now for 20 years. And I certainly wasn't the first instructor or one of the first 100, but I've been teaching the class consistently for 20 years. I'm the lead instructor here in Tucson with Second Amendment Sports for the Arizona Concealed Weapons Permit class. And in 2005, a number of us were chatting on email, I think 6 of us, and the 4 of us had actually met and decided to form the organization because there just wasn't an effective gun lobby in Arizona.
Mhm.
Yeah, the NRA came here, but they're a national organization, and we wanted a local one. And since we formed in 2005, we've had 2 lobbyists full-time in Arizona's legislature. Every day it's open and quite a few days that it's not. And 27 or 8% of the legislators are members of our organization. And we've had 34 good bills signed by 2 governors over the last 9 years, among them constitutional carry. So
And
the history of, pardon me?
oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
That's kind of the history of where I started and also leading into the Arizona Citizens Defense League.
Well, and the AZCDL is something that we're certainly passionate about here. We run our own training organization called Independence Training, and we every single one of our instructors is a member. Several of us are life members. We've done a lot of stuff with the AZCDL just in promoting them over the years. For people who don't know, we actually it's listed on the AZCDL website. If you go under member discounts, AZCDL members get 10% off our courses, just so that we can encourage. Because a lot of people will go like, "Oh, if I'm going to get 10% off a course, well, their 10% discount would be, it would be basically less expensive for them to go buy an AZCDL membership and get the 10% discount." So that's our way of encouraging more and more people to go seek out AZCDL membership, because we've talked about the AZCDL several times on our show in the past, and about how, like, if you're in Arizona and you're, within the sound of our voice and you're not a member of the AZCDL, then you're wrong. They are the grassroots organization, and they do more for us than you guys. I mean, certainly you do more for us than any other organization that anybody can be a member of. So very much thank you for helping to form the organization and also being involved in all that you're involved in.
Well, our pleasure, and on behalf of the organization, thank you for your acknowledgement. I think it's pretty cool that you teach not only about firearms training, but also medical courses, which is greatly neglected in our milieu, and something that more people ought to be aware of. I'm a graduate of several emergency medical courses, and it's truly is life-saving, and I hope that I hope you really push that hard.
We do. And in fact, over the years, that's certainly become a greater part of our business every year that passes, just simply because, people are a lot more likely to use those than they are to shoot people. You know that.
Yeah, I do. And unfortunately, the anti-freedom bigots don't.
Yeah.
And that's why programs like this are important to get the word out, and hopefully to infect the anti-freedom mentality with a little bit of freedom, because freedom is contagious.
Now, tell us more about the universal background check. That's what you and I had kind of originally spoke on the phone about maybe a month ago or so, or a couple months, I guess, when we first talked about you coming on the show. And that was kind of the big topic that came up with, like, what about this whole universal background check issue? And part of the issue that I see with it, just from I will call it a layman perspective. I'm not, I don't speak legalese that well. I'm just kind of a layman trying to figure out what's going on with these bills. And really what I see, the problem is that there are going to be, and there are, pro Second Amendment and pro gun right people that are going to say yes to things like this, simply because they don't totally understand what's going on. So kind of explain to us, what is the universal background check thing all about?
Well, the universal background check is a code word for gun owner registration. That's all it is. It's universal registration, because it puts every single private transaction on paper with and who knows who has access to the records. The recent things that you've seen, hacking, be it whether it's Sony or whether it's Target, shows you that neither private companies nor government are that great at securing the data. So anybody that really wanted to find out who owned the guns would be able to would eventually be able to hack the data, but more worrisome manner the government would have every single gun on paper. And that's the dream of the anti-freedom people, is to be able to know who has the guns. Because once you have the list, you can go to them and come up with some pretext for removing them, whatever that pretext is. And if you claim that you no longer have it, well, then they go after you for failure to report the transaction. Or let's say you claim you sold the gun. Well, then if you can't produce a record of a background check, then you violated the law. And if you don't, and if the gun was stolen, then you failed to report it. And all you have to do is have a law about that, and now you're in violation of one or the other. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
So it's not only my responsibility to register it if I purchase a gun, but if I sell a gun, it's not just the other person's responsibility to register that gun, but now I have to file the fact that I sold it and in a sense register the fact that I've sold a gun.
You don't have to file it; it's done automatically at the point of sale. That's the way the system works in Washington. It creates a state database of all transactions, and that database is not. There's no provision for securing the database. So the state has access to the records, and believe me, if the federal government asks the state for a record, it's not going to say no. So in effect, you have what amounts to, even if it isn't a de facto registration system in the law, or a de jure, a legal registration system set up, it creates a registration system by the de facto manner in which it's set up.
So now, which state department is going to be over this?
I have to look at the bill again. I think it's their equivalent of the DPS.
So like whatever public safety.
That's part of the bill I'm not familiar with.
I was just wondering if we're going to do the whole Department of Homeland Security thing and just create another department for every single thing that happens.
Well, possibly they'll send it to the Department of Redundancy Department.
Right. That's possible.
Now you mentioned the point of sale. Would there be like a standard place where if I want to sell Glenn one of my guns, do we have to go to this specific place, do our background check, and sell it to him there?
No, you go to a dealer, to an FFL.
Oh, okay.
FFL then has to put it in its book.
Got it.
Because what they're doing is they're using the NICS system. They're not using an independent system. They're forcing everybody into the NICS system. Well, I got news for you. First of all, there's no law that requires anybody to run the gun through their books. Second of all, when you do run it through the books, what you're doing is you're forcing the dealers to have all kinds of possibilities for errors of entering some firearm that's not, it doesn't have a UPC that can't scan it in. There's a lot of things, but there's a lot of paperwork. People don't realize when you're an FFL, there's a lot of parts to a firearm transaction you don't see. It's kind of like an iceberg. You're only seeing the part that's visible out of the water. The majority of it isn't. You don't see all the paperwork requirements and how often they have audits from ATF, and they have to make sure that every single stroke of the pen is correct, and for every stroke of the pen not. Just very simple things like writing the year out instead of putting 14 in the slot can be a fine for that dealer. And it's just an opportunity for more paperwork violations that eventually can cost the dealer his license. So on top of that, it's anytime ATF wants to come in and look at the firearms record book, excuse me, they can. And if they're looking for something specific and they demand to see the dealer's record book, they can look at it. They're not supposed to make copies of it, but they do. And now you've got they can track anybody they want in terms of firearms transactions. Let me give you a practical example of this. Okay, here's what's wrong. One of the things I do, my main employment is I'm in the radio business. During the weekend, I have three talk shows, and one of those talk shows is called Swap Shop. It's on a terrestrial radio station here in Tucson, and I've been on the air almost 16 years now with the Swap Shop. Lots of people call in. It is the unregulated free market, governed only by common courtesy and common sense. And you can buy and sell and trade anything you want as long as it's lawful and moral. So your guns are welcome. Things like porn is not. Because, guns have social value and pornography doesn't. So you call in and you want to sell a gun. And there's quite a few people on my program who buy and sell and trade guns. Not for a living, but because for their collection. So you call in, you offer to sell a gun on my program. And you say, I've got a 1911, it's a Ruger, I've had it about a year, I'm the original owner, and I want $500 for my Ruger 1911, and I've got 4 magazines, the box, and the papers with it. And here's my phone number, and they'll actually say it on the air. Anybody who wants to buy the gun can call it. And here's the problem: if that system were to come to Arizona, there's no way to enforce the background check. There's no way, unless police are going to monitor my program, find out his phone, take his phone number, find out from the cellular company who the subscriber is, and go run code 3 with siren and lights to that person's house to make sure that they don't sell the gun. There's no way to enforce it. Well, there is one way. You could pass a law that says it's illegal to sell a gun on the radio. A little bit of a problem with the First Amendment there, but hey, it's important that we keep guns out of the hands of criminals.
Now, real quick, just because you mentioned
Fast and Furious.
that really cool sounding show, which I haven't heard, but now I want to listen to. Tell us where to find that show, real quick.
Well, I'm on the radio, on the terrestrial radio. I'm on AM 1030 KVOI in Tucson. If you want the archive of it, I put the last week's show up on Swap Shop. You can listen to it. It's LibertyWatchRadio.com. Again, LibertyWatchRadio.com. And click on, for the Swap Shop, click on the Swap Shop, the third button down or so on the left side of the page. And you'll go to the page. I take notes, all the things that people call in to buy and sell and trade. I write down, I put on a Word doc, and I post the doc to the internet. And then I also record the entire show with a hyperlink. You can just click on it and listen to the last week's show. I put yesterday's show up just last night. On my other program, Liberty Watch, if you go to recent shows, you can listen to the last 6 months of the program. I have fascinating people that I interview. Hang on. Pardon me. I've had the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs on for an hour. CNN would not get him for 7 minutes. I've had Tuskegee Airmen, several Medal of Honor holders. They're not winners; they're holders. I've been, like I say, I've been doing this for a long time, and very few people say no when I invite them to come onto the air. I even had Dawn Wells on, Marianne from Gilligan's Island. I had Marianne on a couple weeks ago. I don't do a lot of entertainment interviews, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, now that show I have listened to, and that is a great show, because I heard about that several years ago, just from my association with the AZCDL. So that show is a great show, and for our listeners, you should definitely check it out, because Mr. Heller is fantastic on the radio, as you can tell. So before we've got a few minutes before we have to take our first break. Before we do that, tell us on a national level where the threat is of universal background checks. What's going on in it? We know that Washington's kind of taken the road down the dark path, but what about on a national level? Where do we need to be really aware of this?
Well, first of all, we have a page on our website, on the AZCDL website, called Background Check. There's all kinds of information about it there. You can stay current, but that way. But here is the problem. Nationally, there is no great move towards any form of gun control right now. Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a lot of fantasies, but right now there is no national will to do this. However, at the state level, you saw Colorado put in a fairly vicious bill against people's rights a couple of years ago, or last year rather. You saw the SAFE Act in New York. At the state level, the anti-freedom people know that they cannot get a national bill. But at the state level, they can focus on certain states that are weak in their protection of rights, and they can go after them. And the other thing they can do is they can, in states which have initiative and referendum, they can get something, an initiative put on the ballot by paying petition circulators to get enough signatures to put this on the ballot. The problem is people, as you alluded to earlier, Glenn, the people look at it and say, background check. Gee, I had to have a background check for my job. Or, gee, I work with children. Of course I have to have a background check. What could be wrong with that? And the problem is the devil's in the details. And the main thing is it creates universal registration. If they can get enough states, Bloomberg has basically helicoptered in a lot of money. And if they can get enough states to do this, then they can go to the federal government and go, look, the states are doing this. Why don't you guys get with the program and do what the states are doing? And in effect, it'll be a back door to gun registration. It'll be through the back door or the side door what they could never do frontally. And you can see in New York what's happened in Buffalo. As soon as somebody dies, the police monitor the death notices and cross-check for a permit. If they do, they show up and demand the guns. You know,
Right.
these could be heirlooms. They're private property, and they're seizing it just because the person died and someone in their family. The family has 15 days to transfer the guns, but the cops will grab the guns in that 15 days and take them. That's one example. Their mental health list. They've got people who have never been adjudicated mentally incompetent, but New York has just identified 387 people that they claim are no longer qualified to own a gun because of their mental health record. Well, maybe they're on some psychotropic drug, but they've never been adjudicated incompetent or a danger to themselves. Those guns are being seized right now as we speak.
Well,
So
that's always part of
some
the
problem.
issue. As vets, you know, that's always something we worry about with guys who've been through the VA and are, you know, getting disability because of PTSD or something like that. I mean, that is just this whole mental incompetence thing, man. That is a back door into taking guns away from veterans.
Oh yeah, and thousands have had their rights removed simply by when they declare that when they go on a disability, they can raise their disability quite a bit by having a declaration of incompetence and having a conservator appointed for them. But that loses them their rights in most cases, and it's terrible because just because a person can't balance a checkbook doesn't mean he or she should lose their right to the tools of self-defense. You know, here it's kind of ironic. Here people, you know, basically write a check to the government, a blank check that says up to and including the price of my life if necessary to defend their country, and then their country at some point turns around and says, "Yeah, but we don't trust you anymore. Now that we trained you on how to use a gun, let's make sure you don't have one." You know, it's disingenuous at best. It's dishonest, and it's also it's a dishonor to our veterans who we ought to be thanking for their service.
Well, and here's another thing people don't realize, coming back after a couple deployments and getting out and going through the VA system, literally as a post 9/11 vet, if you go through the VA at all, if they find out you have any sort of combat MOS background, they require you to go talk to somebody. And it's just a half hour, an hour interview where they ask you their series of questions that they have pre-written out or whatnot. But in accordance to those answers, there's guys ending up with a PTSD diagnosis on their record that never even filed to go in and be diagnosed with PTSD.
I wonder what would happen if a person went in there and said, "Okay, I'm here," and started asking questions and say, "You know, well, wait a minute, I decline to converse with you." I wonder what the diagnosis would be.
That's PTSD right there.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a quick break, Charles. If you'll hang on the line with us for about 4 minutes, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this. And we have a question from one of our listeners that they posted up that I'd like for you to kind of address as well. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. You are listening to The Arms Room.
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, "Thank you for your service" to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org, or call 928-284-2022.
Breaker 19. How about that bandit? You got them ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey, everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to The Arms Room on the Vets On Media Network.
All right, you're back on the Arms Room. Charles, you still with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Just want to tell all of our listeners that this part of today's show is brought to you by AR500 Armor. And as always, up on our table here, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see we have our plate carrier that we always have, our Banshee. This is the Banshee plate carrier that if you've been watching any of the AR500 Armor videos, this is the carrier that I'm wearing in there. And we upgraded it last week. I got tired of those giant double mag pouches, so I got rid of those things and upgraded it all with HSGI tacos, which you can also get from AR500 Armor. So make sure you check them out, and make sure you check out our video series on AR500 Armor's YouTube channel and also Independence Training's Facebook page. All right, so I got a quick question from one of our listeners for you, Charles. It's kind of more of not really so much of a question as more of a statement, but I think he's seeking a response. So I want to get your take on this. So he said, in regards to New York, Connecticut, and Washington's recent laws, I hear a lot of folks talk about, well, we just need to get the cops to not enforce it. And we hear about a lot of cops who say they won't enforce these laws. And he's right. You know, even in Colorado, we have a bunch of sheriffs who are like, we're not going to enforce this. It's unenforceable, et cetera.
Well, in Colorado, they're suing. The sheriffs are suing.
Right. And I think they actually stand a chance possibly having it repealed. But he continues on and says, to some, this sounds great. No one will enforce the law. However, I truly think this is a disaster in waiting. Yes, today the law may not be enforced and we will be happy, but by the time our kids reach our age, this law will be set in stone. It'll first get used against bad guys and no one will complain. And before people know it, like the NFA, it'll be the law of the land and no one will complain. The new generation of cops will just think of it as another law. If we don't defeat these laws now and fight them now, it'll be much harder to repeal them. What are your kind of your thoughts on that, Charles?
Well, I'm as friendly towards this type of law as I am towards cancer. That's what it is. You know, and the people who say, that well, this isn't a bad law or vote for it, they're like saying, you know, I support oncologists. I just don't like their work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the logic. That's the logic in this. And it. Let me be more blunt. These things, like you point out. I don't know that I can be any more blunt than calling a law like this cancer. But let me be more blunt. What this does is it changes the right to keep and bear arms into a government-granted privilege.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say, "Master, may I?" before you transact a firearm, a deal with a gun. And a gun is just an object. It's a piece of personal property. And the government should have no say about your personal property unless you use it in a way that's damaging to the personal rights of another person. And I don't know how much more plain it has to be for people to be able to see it. I mean, some folks, I'm not talking about some of the people on our side that reminds me of the monks walking along in Monty Python chanting in Latin and hitting themselves in the head with a board,
Mhm.
then they don't realize it's a board they're hitting themselves with.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned earlier when you're talking about coming from Chicago, you mentioned, you voted with your feet, so to speak. And, we often refer to people as voting with your wallet. It's like, if you don't like the way a place is doing something, then leave that place and don't go back to that place, whether that's a store or a state or whatever. And so a lot of our students, for example, in independence training come from California because, we border them. And so a lot of them will come over and train with us. And they're always telling us, like, why, how do we get more involved and how do we do this? And I always kind of jokingly tell them, like, well, why don't you move? You know what I mean? Like, what's your freedom worth? Okay, I understand you got a good job and a big house and a family and all that, but what's your freedom worth? Is it worth it to you to do whatever it is you do in California that you could probably do here, just simply because you don't want to fight back against it? And so we always kind of jokingly tell people, like, well, just move. Okay, you live in Chicago, move. You live in California, move. You live in Washington, move. Do you think that to an extent, and that's always kind of our answer, just like, okay, well, then you can't change it because you're just one little guy, so get the hell out of there. Do you think that using that as an answer is almost a way of kind of creating, as you mentioned earlier, more of a backdoor? Because eventually we're going to be surrounded by this stuff. If we all keep packing ourselves into the same states, call it whatever, half a dozen states or a dozen states or whatever that we all choose to kind of use as a bastion, do you think that eventually we're just going to be surrounded by this if we don't fight back against the kind of stuff like what they're doing in Colorado?
It's too broad a question to which to say yes or no. It depends on the person and the circumstance. It's difficult to say to someone, no, you should stay and fight, when you know that they're going to lose. They're going to lose the fight. It's like telling a military unit, you will hold this position at all costs. What did you just sentence them to?
Yeah.
By the same token, there will be people who are not going to leave. I know people in New York from my trips up there and from my time with JPFO, where I made a speech on the steps of the legislature in Albany up there. And I know people from there that aren't going to move. They have family, they have property, they have history in New York, and they're not going to move. They're going to stay. They are going to stay and fight. Those are the people that of needs must stay, and they must engage and try and kill the evil that gun control is. So a person has to do what's right for them, and to make a blanket statement, well, if people keep moving, they'll end up being surrounded. Well, you know what? The people in Israel are surrounded. They're doing okay.
Good point.
I mean, I don't think it's wise to be defeatist and say, if we all move, then there'll be abandoned states where gun control just reigns supreme.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think the right people will be in the right place, and we shouldn't make a blanket statement that says, "Hey, they shouldn't move. They should stay and fight." No, I don't think that's the right answer. I think you will find Dick Hellers throughout and Otis McDonald's throughout the world. Second Amendment Foundation is very good at finding defined plaintiffs. Well-defined plaintiffs who are perfect, like Parker in D.C. The case in the Heller case in D.C. was called Parker first, but she lost her standing with the court, and that's when the case became known as Heller. So, I mean, there will be plaintiffs aplenty who can find standing and who can go after this. The problem is they don't have a circumstance like we have in Arizona where we can go to the legislature and get effective legislation. Hopefully, it'll stay like that in perpetuity.
So if you're saying that, it's not necessarily, as you said, a easy blanket statement to make. Sometimes it's the right chance or it's the right choice to stay. Sometimes it's the right choice to leave. What's your take on a lot of the, there's so many firearms companies or firearm accessory companies or whatever, firearms industry companies, we could say, that are kind of leaving their states and going to other states. Now, on one hand, we kind of applaud that and say, hey, if such and such state doesn't want your money, bring it to a free state. Well, we'll take all your tax money and all that. We'll take all your extra employees. We'll take all that. But then there's also that kind of loss of their support in that community or in that industry in that state. And again, I know it's you can't make a blanket statement and say, well, this company made the poor choice for leaving or this company made the right choice for leaving. But what's kind of your take, since you're really more on the front lines of this than probably anybody else? What's your take on that?
If you'd like my take, and as a guy that works in radio, I want permission to change the paradigm of the question.
Okay, go.
I can tell you how we could really fight this but I doubt seriously whether businesses are in business to make a profit, not to make a political point.
Sure.
So businesses are hesitant to get into a political fight with the state. But I'll tell you how we could fight this if the firearm companies had the testicular fortitude to do it. That is, they could simply apply the laws of the civilians to the state. If the New York State Act says that you can't have a magazine larger than 10 and you can't load it more than 7, I would design, if I were Glock, I would design a magazine with 7 rounds for the Glock 19. And I'd only sell those to the law enforcement agencies. That would be the only magazine I would ship to New York for law enforcement. And they'd say, I'm sorry, the chances of a civilian getting hold of a police officer's gun and violating the SAFE Act are too great for us to take the risk. We're going to limit law enforcement to 7 rounds in the magazine. And if we could get Smith & Wesson and Glock and Ruger to apply the same laws to the civilians, in other words, in Arizona, a police department could own a full auto because the citizen can here. In New York, well, they actually can in New York too. There are private machine guns in New York in collections. But in a state where they don't allow machine guns in private hands, then like California, if we could get the manufacturers to agree not to ship full autos to apply the civilian law to law enforcement. No, this is the law in California. Yeah, but we're exempt. Yeah, but the risk is too great. We're not going to do that. If we could get the major manufacturers to apply the civilian laws to law enforcement and basically put a ligature around the neck of the legislature in that state, then maybe we could push back on this. I realize I'm speaking in a fantasy sense, but what I'm saying is that would really put pressure on legislators, because the law enforcement lobby would come to them and say, will you stop this? Look what you're doing. They get mad at their legislator. They wouldn't get mad at legislature. They wouldn't get mad at Smith and Wesson. And as far as companies moving and losing the support of their state, you know what? That's what a free market does. You know, there's a song that has a punchline, God bless Texas. Texas has a wonderful climate for business. They want business, and they love firearms businesses. Frankly, I don't know what's keeping Remington in Lyon, New York. I have no idea. If I were on the board of directors of Remington, I'd have already bought a house in Texas.
So I like that. I like that take, though, to force, using the money and specifically, I was thinking of the whole Colorado issue where Magpul uprooted from Colorado and left to kind of split their business between Wyoming and Texas. And I was thinking, at first I was really applauding them because, man, Magpul guys, they were down at the state legislature. They were really trying to fight the good fight. They warned them, if you guys pass this, we're out of here. And all the, millions and millions of dollars that they brought into that economy. And at first I kind of applauded them. And then after it was all said and done, I almost said, well, hold on a second. Did you just abandon your post? That's almost kind of the feeling I had, like, well, wait, couldn't you have maybe pushed back a little harder?
You did not abandon your post. Your post abandoned you.
But don't you think that those guys could stay and fight? I mean, now, like you mentioned earlier, where you've got the sheriffs who are suing the state, people are fighting back against that, just because they kind of had a ridiculous legislation going on that the people didn't necessarily support, and they're actually fighting back.
I think you're taking a ground level view rather than a contextual view.
Okay.
I think your perspective is so close to it. I think because your military experience was ground, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Army. I think you're looking at this from the ground. I don't think you're looking at this strategically.
Okay.
I think what you have to do is you have to use a pincer movement on government. I think what you have to do is you have to put both political and economic pressure on them at the same time. The economic pressure comes from losing the tax revenue of these companies. The political pressure comes from the other people fighting. I think you fight on various fronts. I also think you go after them asymmetrically. I don't think you need that the only battle is to stand your ground and fight with them battle. And if retreating if making a tactical move, a tactical movement to another state is not a concession. It's not a surrender. It is denying them the revenue they need. So I think that moving to another state is a strategy. It's a battle strategy. As I like to say, if Magpul be for us, who can be against us?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's a good point.
I mean, these are strategies. It's not a retreat. It's not a surrender. It's a tactical move to another position.
Well,
I think there's no reason why. I think there's no reason why you can't have standing in a state by moving out of it. You could sue the state for poisoning the well of your business and forcing you to move. You'd still have standing.
But that's an excellent point. I think you're definitely right and I think that's part of the issue. I mean, I will say that maybe guys like us here at the table are kind of part of the issue when I don't want to say the problem, but kind of part of the issue where we're trying to look at things. We're trying to figure out, what the best way is to attack this problem of gun, the attack on gun rights. And that's where, by the way, I mean, this is a great plug for the AZCDL. That's why it's so important for guys like us at this table and everybody listening to this show and everybody out there who owns a firearm to get out there and get involved with your grassroots organization, because you've got guys like Charles Heller that are going to be sitting at the helm and steering that ship, so to speak.
And those guys can see.
They see the big thing.
They see the whole picture. They see exactly what's going on, where it's going on, who's doing this, some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we're not ever going to see or be privy to.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right. And it's a necessity. There's got to be, by the way, just for the record, although I am a co-founder of the Arizona Citizens Defense League, I was on their board for 8 years. I did leave the board a little over a year ago, and I'm an officer at the corporation. I'm their media coordinator, but I'm not technically at the helm anymore. I don't want to give the impression that I'm something that I'm not. I never want to claim. I like, for instance, I regret that I didn't, but I never served in the military, and so although I use military analogies, I never want to give the impression that I'm claiming something I didn't do. It's, we have to first, the first casualty in the right to keep and bear arms against us is usually the truth.
Right.
And I want to make sure that the truth stays whole.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll tell you this, man, you don't have to regret not serving in the military, because I think you're doing more for freedom than a lot of guys who've served in the military. So thank you for what you do.
My pleasure. I just don't want to ever intimate. I have a tremendous interest in naval history, and I've been to visit 25 of the submarines, the 25 of the 28 submarines that are on display, and I've been to sea for a day on the Tucson and the Los Angeles class Tucson, and I've done a whole bunch of other interesting things. But because I talk about it a lot, some people think that I'm a submarine sailor, and I've always been a civilian, and I just, I want to make sure that I don't create an impression in somebody's mind that I'm trying to be something I'm not.
Perfect, man.
Not who I am, and it's not what the organization wants either. It's not. We want to be true. We want to present the true facts the way they are and let people make up their minds. That's one of the reasons why this whole background check thing is such a detriment to the body politic of gun owners. It's because they look at it on its surface, like a lot of people are tempted to do, and say, background check, what could be wrong with that? What they don't realize is it's a structure designed to completely undermine and remove their rights.
Now, we have another question that just got posted, and I don't know what you know about this, so if you don't have an opinion, that's fine. But it says, a question for Heller. Any opinion on Hollis versus Holder or Watson v. Holder? The suits are to overturn 922.
Which one is Hollis versus Holder?
It says the suits are to overturn 922, the machine gun ban from FOPA, based on Form 1 machine guns that were approved.
I'm familiar with it, but as an organization, we've not yet formed an opinion. Okay. We concentrate mostly on Arizona issues, and frankly, anything that knocks down a federal law prohibiting something we'd like to do is generally a great idea.
Right.
But on principle, I'll comment on that. But as far as the specific, I'm not an attorney, and we don't have an attorney. Well, we have several attorneys that do work for us. But,
right.
That's not an issue AZCDL is involved with.
Okay.
Frankly, I have an idea on it. I think it's a way we could get machine guns back. And one of the things we should do, first of all, is get suppressors out of the ATF hands and just treat them like ordinary weapons.
Yes.
They don't shoot anything. What's the difference? I'd like to see them deregulated utterly. I'd like to see you be able to buy a suppressor at Ace Hardware for $59. But maybe I'm just having a fantasy moment here. But the thing you could do with NFA is change NFA to all items within NFA being equal. and then change the tax a little bit from 200 to 250. Eliminate the AOW class, so everything is a 250 transfer. And then once it becomes an AOW, it doesn't matter what, or once it becomes a class 3, it doesn't matter what you do with it. So let's say you want to create a machine gun, you take an AR and you file a Form 4 to make it into a short-barreled rifle, and then once it has a tax stamp attached to it, now you legally put an auto sear in it and make it a machine gun, because it doesn't matter what it is. Same thing with AOWs. The short shotguns, these witness protection shotguns, you take once it's a class 3. If you bought it as a $5 tax stamp right now, you can't put a stock on it. That makes it into a short-barreled shotgun. That's a $200 stamp.
Right.
You could do it, but you'd have to get another stamp to do it. Well, under my idea, everything would have the same stamp, so it wouldn't matter once it was a class 3 what you did with it. Now, once you got a class 3 gun, you legally convert it, and you've got a legal machine gun. It's a way around the I'm trying to think of the name of the amendment to the FOPA, to the 1986 FOPA, that froze the number of machine guns.
Oh, I can't remember what that was, but I know what you're talking about.
The something amendment.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah, I saw right on the tip of my tongue right now, man. I think, in fact, we were talking about it on the phone when I first called you, I think. And yeah, anyways, so before we've got just a few minutes left with you on the show, and before we go, we've talked about it on the show before, and I want to kind of hear you say it, because I think it bears repeating, especially by someone who's got a lot of experience and who's been involved very heavily, kind of on the ground floor, so to speak. And that is, why is it so critical that gun owners, be they hunters, be they veterans, be they recreational competition shooters, every group of shooters kind of has a different type of firearm ownership idea. This guy's only got bolt action hunting rifles. This guy's only got, raced out, tricked out competition guns. This guy's got nothing but, battle rifles or military replicas. This person only, carries pistols and owns pistols and whatnot. So you've got all these kind of different groups, I would say, of shooters. Why is it so critical for everybody to join their local grassroots organization? And while I love to pitch the AZCDL, this is a show that is heard internationally and certainly nationally. So it's important for everybody, and some people may not even have a grassroots organization. So if they haven't, if they don't have one and they haven't got involved in another way, shape, or form, why is it so crucial that people get involved on a local level, the local state level, with their grassroots organization or their legislative capability? I mean, what could you say that would fire these people up that aren't involved? For those of us who are involved, we're already fired up about it. But for people who aren't involved, who just kind of sit back and say, oh, well, I'll let happen whatever happens, and my hunting rifle's protected or my handgun's protected or whatever. What can you say to people to fire them up?
The country, and it doesn't matter what country we're speaking of. The country is a reflection of its cantons if you're in Switzerland, or its counties if you're in the United States. The national consciousness is a reflection of the local people. And if you don't begin at the grassroots to drive the roots deep into the bedrock of freedom, you will be easily uprooted when a statist comes along to take your freedom. Therefore, a shotgun is a machine gun, is a pistol, is a flintlock. We are all in the same boat. And you cannot allow the ice pick of statism to poke holes in the other guy's end of the boat, assuming that your end of the boat is safe.
I like that. I like that analogy. I'm going to start using that.
Well, I think that boils down to the backdoor thing too, is if we don't all stand united against this, then, people are like, oh, my hunting rifle is not going to be effective. Well, maybe not today, but the more ground you let them take, you never give an inch, because it's just going to get bigger and bigger.
Well, and
I lovingly disagree with you about never give an inch. That's a philosophy of fighting rearguard actions. I think what we need to say is always take an inch. That's what we've done at the Arizona Citizens Defense League. Look, you know what? We don't want machine guns in kindergarten, or we don't want machine guns in kindergartens. We'll settle for semi-automatics in high schools this year. And just every year you come back and you take another bite. That's exactly how we've been losing our freedom for the last 40 years. And it's exactly how we're going to get it back. This is what we've been doing. Hey,
Nice.
look, we'll just take the pasture next door, not a problem. But we're going to keep taking the pasture next door. And pretty soon, our cows of freedom will be grazing on the grass of freedom. That's how it works. That's our basic philosophy, and it's the philosophy we've been, that's worked for the last 9 years.
So essentially, you're just saying instead of setting up a defense and say no one gets past this point.
Put on charge.
We charge, we counterattack, so to speak, where we're constantly moving forward.
I have two words for you: fixed bayonet.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Twice in one
It's that
episode.
simple. It is a slow, steady charge. The original idea of a bayonet charge was not running. The original idea of a bayonet charge, if you ever go to Fort Sumter, they demonstrate a bayonet charge. It was a very slow, deliberate move. It was meant to scare people out of their positions, not run them through. Yeah, the threat was to run them through. But the idea was to convince the enemy that this is a good time to take a vacation. And that's what we need the anti-freedom bigots to do, is to simply abandon their posts. We need to be the ones that are causing them to abandon their posts by any means necessary, short of force. By any lawful means, what we need to do is scare the people politically, I'm talking, not by threatening them with force of arms, but we need to scare them politically into inaction against us.
I really like I like the way you put everything you just said, man.
Yeah.
I love the idea of not poking a hole in one side of the boat and hoping that doesn't affect you. I really like that. I'm gonna start using that against people when I have an
essay called 50 Points of Freedom.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I like to say is that the inner tube of liberty has always got more energy than the ice pick of statism to poke holes in it. And there's a human desire for freedom. There really is a human desire for freedom. It's something that can be managed to the benefit of freedom. The problem is that you have people like Rahm Emanuel, who says no crisis should be wasted. They want to use Alinsky principles to bend the will of man to their evil purpose. What we want to do is we want to bend the human will of freedom and focus it so that it's focused against the enemies of freedom in order to preserve it. It's not to aggrandize any one person or to exalt any one person. It's to lift up the principles that the country was built on. The idea here is that you fuel, you put energy, you put air into the balloon of liberty, and you try to put it in faster than the enemies of freedom can poke holes in it. It's a never-ending battle too. The idea that there's going to be some apocalyptic fight and at the end we're going to win is insane.
Yes, it is.
This is a constant struggle between good and evil. It's kind of like the idea on background checks. It's an insane idea that you can never keep insane people from getting a hold of arms, and it's an insane idea to ever think you can keep criminals from getting a hold of arms. They're focused on those people are looking through the wrong end of the telescope. That's why they can never succeed. They're attempting to do something that's not possible to do. Well, can a psychologist decide when someone's going to become violent? What a jerk to think that way.
Right.
What you need to do is have people at the point of purchase, i.e. where the violence occurs, who are armed. And that's how you stop the violence. The problem is the people who want to make everything nice and rosy are people who are just simply disconnected from reality. And the worst thing is they want to make the rest of the world think that you and I are disconnected from reality. No, we're not. Water is wet, fire is hot, and people will do violent things. And the only way you stop the violence is with lawful, deadly force.
Okay,
sorry.
I wish you were here so I could hug you. So on that,
sense. This is not extraordinary wisdom. This is common sense. The problem is that as a society we have walked so far from common sense that it now seems to us when viewed from any distance whatsoever, it now seems novel and wonderful and exalted. It ain't. It's common sense. You know, this is like using the paper after, you know, in the bathroom. It's what you do. I don't want to be overly graphic, but I'm just trying to tell you, this isn't extraordinary. This is what you're hearing now is normal.
Yeah.
Or what normal should be. I'm not declaring myself to be the gold standard. I'm just saying the principles here that I'm espousing are normality.
Absolutely.
Right? And the problem isn't that listen to Heller, he's brilliant. No, I'm not. I'm just saying what a lot of other people have said. But what I'm saying is we've walked so far from common sense that common sense now seems to be the shining city on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
It ought to be common sense.
And on that note, we've got to we got to cut out of here. But I really appreciate you coming on the show and calling in and taking your time and sharing with us a lot of great information and sharing with us common sense, because you're absolutely right. Most of what you said, everybody should already know, but unfortunately, it has become the less common as opposed to the common.
We're seeing the movie Idiocracy.
The collision at the corner of common and sense.
So if you missed it earlier, you can catch Charles Heller's show at libertywatchradio.com, all one word, libertywatchradio.com. And I'm
on recent shows.
I see it right there on the left-hand side. And also, I'm going to post up a link to your essays up on our Facebook page for the show, for the 50 Points of Freedom. They look awesome. I'm going to read them later. They look incredible. And also, remember, if you are in Arizona, to please check out the Arizona Citizens Defense League at azcdl.org. Become a member. It's like $35 a year. Become a life member. It's only $300 for your whole life to become a life member of the AZCDL. There's a lot of great benefits you get, AZCDL, obviously not just supporting, but also, the annual dinner, which is a lot of fun. You get discounts, as I mentioned, you get discounts in independence training. Our friend over at Tactical Medic, you get discounts over there. There's a lot of cool things you can get by being a member of the AZCDL, so please join it. If you don't live in Arizona, join the AZCDL anyways and support what we do over here. It's only $30 a year. And if you don't live in Arizona and you don't know what your grassroots organization is, find them. Google it, go to a local gun store, training organization, whatever. Someone's bound to know some kind of local training or a local grassroots organization.
Being a member of the NRA is not enough.
Not even close.
They're too broad.
Say one more thing about this.
Please do. Please.
If you are listening to this in another state in the United States, or even in another country, and you would like help in how to form an organization like this, we have sponsored several other citizens defense leagues in other states.
Nice.
We've given them copies of our bylaws. We've given them support and assistance behind the scenes. Our treasurer has told them how to structure their organizations. I've told them how to do publicity. There's a lot of we're willing to help sponsor other organizations like this. So you were asking earlier about the grassroots.
Yeah.
We will help you plant the seeds. You're going to have to do the hard work. We can't reach out from Arizona and do that for you.
Sure.
But we'll tell you, and every state is different, but we will tell you what can be done in order to start an organization like ours. If you'd like to, you can have what we've got, and we're not holding the golden keys back to it. If you want help getting it, we will help you do that. That is our duty.
It's literally
that's
a
how
book
we
of
don't
success.
make sure that people don't drill that don't drill a hole in their end of our boat.
Right.
That's how we provide the patch material so they don't do that in the form of information.
And on azcdl.org, I just looked it up on the left-hand side, or even all the way at the bottom, you can click About Us, and there are email addresses to several of all the people, a lot of who I know. Charles is on there. My friend Drake Mitchell's on there. Fred's on there. Good people that can certainly help out. So get on there. Email.
If anyone wants to reach me, it's real simple. Charles Heller at azcdl.org. Again, Charles CHARLES Heller HELLER at azcdl.org.
Perfect. Hey, Charles, thank you very much. We got to get going, but I really, really appreciate your phone call, man. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Hey, you too. All right. Well, that was awesome. and informative. So we got to get going because we're a little over time. But I don't mind going over time for
It
a guy like
happens.
Charles Eller. That was
It happens.
fantastic. That was fantastic. A great way, I like the way he described how so many of us, myself included, look at things from that kind of ground level. We see things from, as I've always said, like you have like the like our friend Shazda, how we're always joking about he's the only officer on our team. And so it's like the rest of us are all like, lift heavy stuff, put it back down. And he's like, this is why you're lifting the heavy
Yes.
stuff, you idiots. So
Wait, what? There's a reason?
yeah, like we don't see that big picture. So thank you, Charles, for showing us that big picture. We really appreciate it. Next week, we've got Matt Kenny from Concerned Veterans for America. Awesome guy. I have met with Matt several times already, talking to him about some cool stuff we're going to be doing for the show and for Independence Training. Matt's phenomenal. CVA is a nonprofit organization that directly helps veterans. This ain't no Wounded Warrior bull crap. This is freaking CVA,
There
man.
you
They
go.
actually
Call
help
them
out.
out.
They actually help out. So check out the Concerned Veterans for America. And, if you haven't checked out their website, do it. We're going to have him on the show in the studio next week, and he's going to be talking to us about CVA. Most importantly, he's going to be talking to us about how to do your homework on a nonprofit organization, because there's a lot of
There you
nonsense
go.
out there. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of people forming nonprofits that aren't really nonprofits.
Douchebaggery.
There is a lot of that. And so Matt is going to be telling us about kind of how to vet a nonprofit organization and how to figure out whether or
Very
not
cool.
they're who they say they are. So we're going to get going. Again, check out our friends over at ar500armor.com. We will see you next week. Until then, stay aware, stay safe, and train hard. You've been listening to The Arms Room.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. Get the rocket trembling, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land under the frame? You're the heart of the Because we are the brave. Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight here in the name of the brave. We are the U.S. of A. For those unaware, that flag is still there. It's our future to save. Stand of the brave, the U.S. of A. Oh, say, does that star-spangled